Hi, I'm your host Vasco Duarte. Welcome to the Scrum Master Toolbox podcast, where we share tips and tricks from Scrum Masters around the world. Every day, we bring you inspiring answers to important questions that all Scrum Masters face day after day. Hello everybody, welcome to our Wednesday, the Leading Change episode this week with Tinatin Tabidze. Hey Tinatin, welcome back.
Hello, Vasco. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. So today's Wednesday, and because we're Scrum Masters, we're always working with change. So today is all about that aspect of our work, how we can help change succeed in organizations, in teams, and sometimes even with individuals that we work with. So tell us a story of one of those change processes you were involved with. And as you walk us through the steps of that change process, also highlight for us the tools, the tips, the tricks, and the techniques you learned back then that you still apply today.
I would say one of the major factors, if you want to actually lead change, would be to be proactive. So again, depending on the organization that you work for, you may be given a different sort of bandwidth as to how much change you can enact on an organizational level, within a team, etc. So I'd say first would be to clear up, maybe with your manager, whoever it is, or just by observing of how much involvement the Scrum Masters have, maybe on an organizational level or whatever their capacity entails. So I would say one very important step would be to proactively seek change wherever you deem it important. Because as a role of a Scrum Master, and you already mentioned, it's a quite broad term. And working with one of the product owners in my previous jobs, we had this conversation a few times. And I think one of the very valuable takeaways that I got from him was that Scrum Master duties are whatever you make them, especially if you are given that freedom. So if you think that you can if you can lead some sort of change, just do it. It doesn't matter whether it is covered by the conventional Scrum Master role description or whatever you go by. So in there, we wanted to have a better way of scaling Agile teams. And that was one of the changes that we had to lead. And this is not just me. A few of my colleagues, we decided to create this sort of very structured framework guide as to how you can scale, especially in complex environments and depending on the systems that you work with. And by leading this change, I think the most important aspect of it would be to first actually believe that there is a need for it, because if you have to lead change, you're going to encounter a ton of resistance. Especially in our line of work, I think being questioned and resisted to is very common. So if you take on something, make sure you believe it, and otherwise it's very hard to stick to it. And then have a very clear understanding of where this need comes from. I would say in our sense, it was necessary to scale because we basically had one shared backlog per domain, and it just made more sense. It would be more efficient to work with less framework. But scaling to that from typical Agile teams would not be a very smooth ride, because usually teams are not very good at managing dependencies, especially as those dependencies are on different teams. But less offers certain techniques that you can utilize to minimize those dependencies. And in the long term, this is a great solution. In the short term, you can encounter certain difficulties, which can maybe play into the hands of those who doubt this change, right? So I would say how we went about it was identify all the failures, like initial failures that we would have to deal with, and we would have to mitigate. Whatever could be mitigated up front, fine. Whatever not, it's okay.
So you were doing prospective failure listing, like, identifying risks or something like that.
Yes. Basically doing a risk log, like risk management sort of activity. So we mapped out all the steps of what it would take, what would be the initial price for it, where would we probably face pitfalls, some things could be utilized, some basically dealt with upfront, some things could not, and that was just how it's gonna be. And I think when you're okay, when you know that you're gonna fail, I don't think it hurts as much. It's fine. It's expected. You can move on. This was just a means to an end, and then it's okay. So I think that's good. That's a good way to go about it. Basically, map out your steps and be your best critic. What would be the questions asked? What would be the best way to go about those questions? And ultimately, stay focused, because there are going to be many impediments when leading change. And if you are very focused and if you have a clear picture of where you want to be at the end of this road, then it's easier to get there. And scaling is one of the examples, but I think even in our daily work, I mean, in the teams, how I go about changing something is not just going in and saying, I'm a Scrum Master, I know better, this is what you should do, these are the techniques you should utilize. I think it's very important to, if you see that a team is failing some aspect, let's say they are failing their velocity, it's not consistent, they're not good at estimating, don't just go in and say, I think you're doing this wrong, guys. I don't think this is your velocity. Let the team fail. This is what I always go back to. Let the team fail, accumulate the data, present it to them, and say, what do you think? Do you think this is a good metric? Do you think we're doing fine? And then they will be the first ones to point out if this is a good team, like with people who are actually motivated to, develop, advance, etc. They will themselves be more willing and open to change as they see that whatever we're doing now is not working. So let's try something else. If that doesn't work, fine, then we can move to another technique or whatever. So I say let the team fail first, present the data, have it readily available. Again, visualization is such a good way to go about it. Like just show them the Jira reports, whatever it is that you're trying to do. And then usually in my experience, the team themselves are very open and willing to change.
Yeah. And one of the things that is very important with this concept of letting the team fail, of course, within a context, right? You're not going to let them fail 3 months from now. You're going to let them fail this week or next week so that you can have the conversation. And once we understand that, we also start to see that actually at that point, we don't need to push any change because the teams want to change, right? And sometimes it also happens that the teams might have failed, but are not really aware of it because they don't have the habit of reflection. So like that's one aspect we can bring in the retrospectives. We can say, hey guys, over the past 5 sprints, you guys wanted to deliver this, but this is what we delivered. Now, I don't know why this happened, but what do you think about it? Is this how it should be? Right. And a friend of mine once told me, I'll never forget it, that without pain, there's no change. And pain comes from acknowledging our own mistakes, right? And if the team isn't able or isn't given the opportunity to acknowledge their own mistakes, they don't have the motivation to change either.
Yes, one example I can refer to is also in my previous work. So this one time I went to a team asking them, do you guys think we are overcommitting or undercommitting? What do you think our planning is? Is it good or bad? Very simple, right? Overwhelmingly, everyone was for we plan great. I mean, we deliver whatever we commit to. And usually our story point completion is at brilliant 100%, which is not the case. I mean, it was not. And I had the data to back it up, but not as much data as I wished. So I think if I had gone in there saying, guys, we are overcommitting, we're not doing this well, and this is what we should do next, I don't think anyone would be open to listen to me. And fair game, I mean, show me, is this just your opinion or a straight up fact, right? So then once everyone said, okay, we're doing it fine, I pulled up the Jira reports and I was like, okay, let's look at our SCP. this is not 100%. Next sprint, it's not 100%. Another one, still not at 100%. So where does this feeling of like right amount of commitment
completing
come from,
everything?
right? Yeah. So I think that was a good discussion in and of itself, and led to our follow-up of what's our definition of done here. Then do we all have the shared understanding of definition of done? And because some people regarded things that were about to merge but not merged yet as done by the end of the sprint. I mean, surely, yes, it takes, let's say, like 15 minutes after everything's reviewed for it to be merged, but it's still not done. Or is it? And then do we have a shared understanding of what's definition of done? So I think not just circling to one specific point and saying this is good or this is bad and this is right and this is wrong, but rather having extensive conversation of what it is, and also what could the baseline foundational source of it be, and then that can lead to another improvement points, which is always great for a Scrum Master.
And as you were saying, we don't do we don't do 100% of story points every sprint, guys. Here's the data. What do you think? As you were saying that, I was thinking, okay, so they're probably going to say there's some dependencies or whatever. But then you said, and that led us to having a discussion about the definition of done. And I think that's a brilliant example of how our expectations as Scrum Masters can be totally wrong, because I expected you to talk about dependencies or some tool problems or whatever, and it was totally different, right? I didn't think about the definition of done as a potential source of the issue. And I think that when we open that to the team, and the team can say, oh, okay, because this is done, why isn't it done in the sprint? Well, because it's not merged. And then you figure out, oh, that's what's going on. Right. And the team at that point is ready to change.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, as a Scrum Masters, we always have, let's say, ideas or options of why things are the way they are, but who can give you the best context? The actual people who are doing it, right? So I think it's always the best way to first approach the team with questions and be genuinely interested in the answers, and not just go in with upfront made up mind as to why things are the way they are, and with this attitude of I'm the Scrum Master, I know the best. I think that will always lead to failure.
Absolutely. That's a great point and a great story again. Thank you for sharing that with us, Tinatin.
Thank you for your time.
Leading change is one of the core skills we must acquire, but it is only one of the steps towards our success as Scrum Masters. Tomorrow, on Success Thursday, we will talk about how to define success for the Scrum Master role. We'll cover tips on how to measure your way to that position, and most importantly, how to develop that focus on continuous improvement that is as important for Scrum Masters as it is for teams. See you tomorrow. We really hope you liked our show. And if you did, why not rate this podcast on Stitcher or iTunes? Share this podcast and let other Scrum Masters know about this valuable resource for their work. Remember that sharing is caring.